Hello and welcome to our Gem Pursuit. My name is Matthew Weldon and I'm your host, and we've got a very special episode for you today. We recently visited the original Miami Beach Antique Show, definitely one of the premier antique jewelry shows anywhere on earth. So we were thrilled when we were invited to record an episode of Gem Pursuit live in front of the attendees and some of the exhibitors there this time round. We had a really special episode about a Miami local turned one of the greatest jewellery thieves. Well, at least he pulled off one of the greatest jewellery heists ever. It's a super interesting episode. We're so excited to do it. Let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining us for this live session of Gem Pursuit, which is our podcast. Naturally, we're in the antique jewellery business as well, and as Michelle just said, we're 11:32. But we're delighted to take a few minutes out and talk about a really interesting story, which is very local to us here in Miami. And when we were asked about doing a live podcast here, we did a little bit of research, and this completely jumped out. It's so relevant and prevalent to this area, the jewellery, and the lifestyle in Miami. So we certainly had to go with it. So Alyce, what are we going to be talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about Jack Murph the Surf Roland Murphy, a prolific jewellery thief, but you would never know it. And we're going to talk about one of the biggest heists that has ever happened on US soil.
Before we get into the heist, which, we'll get into the jewellery. I know we all want to talk about the jewellery involved in this heist, but it's important that we get a little bit of a background on the actual protagonist in this story, because he had a pretty colourful, eventful life, I think it's safe to say. But he didn't start off in Miami, did he?
No. Jack Roland Murphy actually grew up in America as very much the all-American kid. Born in California in the 1930s. He grew up on the beaches and was surfing from a very young age, but was also seen as a very bright individual. He was very musical, and then also was an apt tennis player and a champion, which gave him his scholarship when their family moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and he was born in California, they moved to Pennsylvania. He parlayed his tennis abilities into actually getting a scholarship. However, I think the university life probably didn't suit Mr. Murphy very well, to put it mildly. So he soon dropped out and went for the sunnier shores of Miami Beach.
Yes. So this is really where the story kind of starts to get quite interesting, because he, basically goes education. He poo-pooed that. Not interested at all. And
we don't recommend that.
But he really was interested in, partying. He was very much a water baby, so Miami seemed like the perfect fit for him. He made his way down to Miami Beach and became a cabana boy. He was also a diver. He was doing water acrobatics for guests at different hotels. And he was just really enjoying his life. He was like, why would I ever go to university when I can make great money here, but I can also be on the beach, and I can also see bikini-clad women every day? So this was his dream, and he was living his dream on Miami Beach until he was like, actually, you know what? I miss surfing, and they've got great beaches here. Maybe let's bring surfing to Miami.
Yeah, and I mean, he is credited, or he's self-credited with bringing surfing to Miami. But the thing, I suppose, for anyone who's lucky enough to go out and walk on the beach in the morning, which we're lucky enough to do most days, but you'll see that there's not an incredible swell for surfing. So a little bit north, up in Cocoa Beach, apparently there's better surf, better swell. He headed up there, actually set up a business up there, Murph the Surf shop, which is where he gets his name from. Well, he was self-designated this name.
Yeah.
And he said, of all the time periods in his life, the time in Cocoa Beach, if he could relive one again, that is the time that he would like to do again. Surfing, working in the shop, the bikini-clad ladies, like Alyce said, going out partying. This was the type of life that he had up in Cocoa Beach.
Yeah, and Cocoa Beach, I mean, I've never been to Cocoa Beach. I've seen pictures, and I grew up surfing in Australia. So I look at the beaches in Miami and I'm like, South Beach, where are you going to surf there? Like, it's impossible. But the swell, obviously, in Cocoa Beach is better, and that's where he won a lot of his competitions. This is where he got his name, Murph the Surf, because when the storm seasons would happen here in Florida, everybody would be leaving, and the police officers would be sitting on the beach trying to get everybody off the beach, and they'd be like, but hey, there's a guy over there surfing, and they're like, don't worry, that's Murph the Surf. So they knew him, and they're like, he's going to be fine out there, don't worry about him. So he gets his name and he becomes very well known for his surfing abilities. However, his business acumen was not what his surfing abilities were. So this is where he kind of like decides, how can I get out of this business venture that I've started?
Yeah, I mean, as he said himself, he made some business mistakes. I mean, he didn't have his attentions on it, really, I would say. But long story short, with his surf shop, it burned down mysteriously one evening. After that, in this time, he's been married and he's had 2 kids. So he's been really busy up in Cocoa Beach. But he heads back down to Miami. He was a cabana boy there before. You know, they were making decent money, but nothing really incredible. When he goes back to Miami, he realizes that all of his buddies who were there before, all of a sudden they've got really nice clothes, they're driving these really nice cars, they've got a great lifestyle, they don't seem to be working very much, and he's trying to put it together, and he's going, what is going on here? But it becomes revealed to him what's happening.
It does. Pretty quickly, you know, he understands that there's some kind of criminal activity happening here because you can't get paid the amount that you would need to be living the lifestyles that they were. And of course, he wants a slice of the pie. He's hanging out with these guys, he's partying with them, he also wants to be a part of the club. And this is where Alan Kuhn and him become quite good friends, both very athletic. And to kind of be in the club, they did need people who were super athletic, agile, and, you know, were really liked that kind of adrenaline rush. So they not only could do it, they actually really loved the thrill of the chase. They liked to be able to feel, oh my gosh, the pressure of stealing something and then getting away with it. So all of these guys, this group of guys, were really egging each other on, you know. And this is where the stakes started getting a little bit higher and higher each time they did these particular robberies.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was a crucial moment for him, Alyce. And as you said, he was super athletic, right? And it becomes apparent why this is necessary. So the first time Alan Kuhn says to him, you know, we've got a job tonight. Do you want to come out and do this with us? And he says, sure. It involves they're going to a property in the Keys.
Key
Biscayne. They're on a boat, and his job is that he doesn't actually go into the property. He's not actually fully sure what he is doing, but what he knows is that he's going to be given a parcel. He has to jump into the water from the boat and swim to a pre-designated location. He knows he wasn't delivering an Amazon parcel, right? But it was quite a swim. It was in the middle of the night. There were sirens going.
And police chasing them on boats. So, like, it's a proper chase. There's a speedboat with the 3 men on it, including Jack Roland Murphy. They're speeding away as they've just broken into a house, and all of these sirens are going off. And in the midst of the boat moving, he has to jump out of the boat. So the boat's not stopping for him because the police are still chasing the boat. He jumps off the boat, and he has to swim in the darkness to the place that has been designated. He hands the parcel over, he gets dry clothes, goes into town in a taxi and starts partying. So this was the very first job that he did. And he is sitting in a pub a couple of days later, and he's like literally got no money in his pocket, and he's ordered a drink. And he's like, what am I going to do now? Someone walks in, passes him an envelope with something in it, and leaves the pub. And he opens, you know, has a little look in the envelope, there's $15,000 in it. So he's like, wow, like, ding, like I've found like very, very minimal effort. It's something that I'm really good at for a huge reward.
This was the colonel. He continues, they go through the high-rise buildings, literally scaling the buildings on the outside. Again, the two of them well able to do this type of physical activity. Now, the irony of it actually, which leads to this heist, right? The heist in New York of in the Natural History Museum. The irony of it is the whole reason they were actually there is that because of a botched heist that they tried to do in Miami.
In Palm Beach.
In Palm Beach. They got word there was an exceptionally large diamond that was owned by a socialite down there. And they got an offer from Offense. Offense is someone who wants to pay them for this particular stone. $350,000 was the bounty for this particular diamond. They do the robbery. They get it. They get back. They think this is the best thing that they've ever done. In their mind, it's, as you know, when we were talking at the start, Alyce, you were saying, in their mind, this diamond is already theirs.
Yeah, so the wonderful thing about this group of men is they're so brazen and they think, oh, wow, like we can do anything, right? Once they've done their first, it's like almost like a drug to them. Once they do their first hit and it's successful, they haven't been caught, they feel like they're invincible. And so 350,000 in the 60s is the equivalent to about 3.5 million. So today. So it's a huge job, right? And it's like really lucrative if they were able to be successful. But when they took the diamond that they had robbed to the fence, he kind of was looking over the diamond. He's like started laughing because they were sitting there popping champagne, and it was actually a fake. So she had, been forewarned that, there could be jewelry thieves around, and to be very careful, and obviously had a replica made. Now, this infuriated them. It actually, they wanted their diamond. They'd already celebrated that they had got it. And so they followed this socialite to her Hampton residence and got themselves a penthouse apartment at the Cambridge House in New York City.
Yeah, and as you can probably imagine, this lady is super alert to the risks. I mean, and for Jack Roland Murphy, like and his buddies, like they thought this is a victimless crime. It's obviously not. It's an invasion of your privacy. It's really, really bad.
And
but
sentimental. There's certain things that you can replace in this world, but jewelry is one of those things that is connected to memories, and it's connected to an actual anniversary, and sometimes it's connected to a person who's no longer with you. So it's like a part of them that's with you. And to say that something like stealing jewelry is a victimless crime, really, you don't understand the nature of jewelry if you believe that. And so although they believed, the insurance will cover it, at the end of the day, people were really suffering from the things that they were doing.
So this lady, she's totally alert to it. They realize that it's just too difficult. There's too many people around. Her security is very high. But what happens, and it's almost an opportunistic, and I actually, even after we've read, he has a book which we'll get to, which is an interesting book, but I'm not sure yet whether he's a total genius or just has been extremely fortunate and capable to capitalize on the opportunities that have been presented to him. Because when they're in New York at nighttime, needless to say, there's a lot of parties and so on, but during the day they're going to galleries, they're going to fashion shows, they're going to museums. And one particular day, they go to the Natural History Museum. These guys are jewel thieves. There's, there's 40 exhibits at any given moment, but in the JP Morgan Jewel Hall, there's a whole collection of the most incredible jewelry that you will see outside of the original Miami Beach Antique Show, which is right here. Big star sapphires, diamonds, etc. But they also notice, and they're clued in enough to notice that security there, while they have security procedures, a lot of them have actually, due to cutbacks and due to different reasons, are not working the way that they think they're working.
It's become completely relaxed. I mean, JP Morgan Hall has some of the most incredible gemstone specimens that the world has ever seen. So it's in an incredible museum. We actually were just there in October to see the Star of India, which is its prize gem. In the Natural History Museum. But the relaxation of the security there, and the way that I like to explain it to Matthew, I said to Matthew, it's kind of like us, like we deal in jewellery. So if we walk into a place that has costume jewellery, we usually look around and we see maybe there's something there that isn't costume that they haven't seen, right? And that's an expertise. It's something that we've been doing for a long time. So that's what we do. But for these, seasoned jewelry thieves, they're looking around at security. They're looking for the holes. They're looking for the loopholes. They're like, look at those windows up there. They're left open all night, 2 inches, and there's 19 of them. So we've got a lot of places that we can get into. We need to look outside and see which one of those is going to be easy for us to climb up. And then they're looking around and they're like, that looks like a really profitable gemstone. Let's look at the cabinet. Is it hooked up to some kind of alarm system? They can see that they are alarmed, but they don't know, do the alarms work? But they've cased the joint and they're like, Alan Coons turns to Jack Murph the Surf and he goes, the jewels are saying, take me to Miami, take me to Miami. And he's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do to take them back to Miami.
They duly deliver on that, and pretty quickly, actually. The night of the heist, they have 3 people involved. Alan Coon, Jack Roland Murphy are the 2 people who are actually going to do the heist. They have a lookout as well.
Roger Clark.
Roger Clark is in the lookout. He actually thinks when they leave the car that they're just going to investigate the perimeter. They end up actually scaling the fences into the compound. The open window that you mentioned, Alyce. Yeah, security think this is totally out of reach. It's about 25 feet to 30 feet off the ground. The 2 of them, and using a rope, manage to get themselves up there, climb into the gem hall, realize the alarms aren't working. They start to go to work on the cabinets. They also realize that the batteries in the cabinets are also corroded. So
they're all faulty, so there's no alarms going off. And it's also like they lower themselves into the gem hall and it's very peaceful. There's nothing going on. And they know that the guard is going to come around kind of every 45 minutes. But at the two entrance / exits, there's one on either side of the room, they have steel bars there. So the actual guards, when they come around, only put a flashlight in. And all of the major stones that they want to rob are in the center of the room. So they're actually quite hidden by the cabinetry. So if you shine your torch in, you're not really going to see much from either side of the room. So they're in the center and they're actually in the room for about 4 to 5 hours. And they're never caught. And in the 4 to 5 hours that they're there, they start off initially, they're trying to be quite careful. They cut the glass in one and then they use a little mallet and they hit it, they tap it. And then it falls in and then they grab the gem out of there and they kind of look around and they're like, nothing's happening in here. There's no security whatsoever. And so they also hear the planes above the museum that go to LaGuardia Airport. And they're like, okay, so we're going to use that as well. We'll cut the glass, and when a plane goes over, we'll smash the window. So this is what they do for the rest of the cabinetry. They go through, they find out the most expensive, or they find the gems that they're like, hey, that's big, that looks good. And they literally go through and take what they want in the 4 to 5 hours that they're in there and then go out the same way that they came.
I mean, and when they got out, they had some semblance of a plan. They had split the gems before they left, just in case someone got caught. They'd be able to make bail and pay legal fees or whatever. So they had some sort of method to their madness. But they get away. They go back to their hotel. Or I think they go out for a quick drink first, but they go back to their hotel then after. And within 24 hours, they are the next morning, they're on the first flight back to Miami with the gems in tow.
My favorite story actually is when they split up, and Jack Roland Murphy, or Jack, he goes into the city to the metropole, and he has the Star of India in a bag that he's carrying around with him. He listens to a jazz band and he has, a wonderful time. Comes home and Alan Kuhn is actually on the sidewalk of the Cambridge house. He doesn't have the key to the room. Jack Roland Murphy has the key to the room. So he can break into the Natural History Museum, but can't even break into his own penthouse suite, and waited outside this whole time for Jack to come back after robbing the Star of India. So it's like, it's all a little bit like impulsive. It's not like very well done. It's just like, we can do it, so we're gonna do it. And they get back to Miami, and because there's no real finesse to their robbery, it starts to come undone.
On the flight down, they don't want to carry the stones, so they enlist the help of a 19-year-old lady to actually carry all the gems down. They have them in a small little bag. To begin with, she was kind of okay with it. They'd sufficiently given her confidence that there's nothing too bad going on. But by the time they actually get to Miami, she's extremely nervous.
Rattled.
And ultimately, they're actually caught very quickly because they've left in New York in their penthouse suite. They've left maps of the Natural History Museum. Their shoes were left behind that has fragments of the glass. It's a very particular type of safety glass that was used in these cabinets. And, obviously the itinerary of them leaving back to Miami, they're tracked down very quickly.
Also, they're having parties and telling everybody that they're going to do it. They were really concerned with their image. And if you do look up Jack Roland Murphy, you'll see him. He is suave. He is really charismatic guy. He dresses impeccably. And every time he did a robbery, he said, I made sure I had on my best outfit, because if I got caught by the police, I wanted to make sure that I looked good for the paparazzi. And I was like, but when you look at him from the 1960s, he is a poster boy. He is really good looking, charismatic, and unassuming, I would say. You would say, yeah, he's a really cool guy, but you wouldn't say, oh yeah, he would rob the Star of India or take anything out of your hotel room.
Just before we started, we actually talked to a gentleman who actually knew him. And the first thing he said was, oh, Jack was a great guy. And and he said he was always really nice, very polite, great surfer. But exactly what you're saying,
Yeah,
you wouldn't think he'd be a gem thief.
You would never, ever think that he would be involved in that kind of lifestyle. But he was, and he was impeccably dressed when the FBI slammed down the door 2 days later, and were looking for the gemstones. However, the gemstones weren't on them.
I mean, this is 50 years ago today, right? And 50 years ago today, these stones were actually found here in Miami. But, I mean, the guys know that their only ticket out of this really is to parlay their knowledge of where these gemstones are to actually get lighter sentence, to reduce time or whatever. So they go into negotiations with the FBI to try and get them back. But I think it's important that we talk a little bit about these gemstones, seeing as this is an antique jewelry show, because there are quite incredible examples of, I mean, there are a broad range of stones, but they're the best in their category.
And this is where it became difficult for Jack and for Alan to actually move these stones along. So a lot of the other pieces that they were stealing, or items that they were stealing, is a lot of commercial stuff, and for the 60s, it would have been things that you'd be able to remove, you'd be able to melt down the metals, you'd be able to take the stones out, and people wouldn't really be able to understand what the pieces of jewellery were originally. But the 4 gemstones that we're going to talk about aren't those kind of stones. So, and I think that they didn't really understand, that actually you can't cut down 100-carat star sapphire and make it into something else and it still be valuable. So the gemstone that I want to talk about really quickly is the Midnight Star. Now, if you've gone around the show, you may have seen sapphires that produce this kind of 6-rayed star on the top of the stone as you move it along. This is caused by rutile inclusions in the stone. And that's rare, but this is coupled with its size. So the Midnight Sapphire is 116 carats, and its coloration is what I would say is like a purplish violet or a violetish purple. Now, it's a bit like the white and gold dress, or the black and blue dress. People see different things with this stone. So it's called the Midnight Star because some people think it's a ruby and some people think it's a sapphire, because it can also look kind of purplish red. So that would mean that it was a ruby. So they just call it the Midnight Star. But if you can imagine that kind of coloration, it's very distinctive. You can't sell that to someone and say, actually, no, it's 116 carats like the Midnight Star, and it looks like the Midnight Star. No, it's not the Midnight Star. It is the Midnight Star. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So this is, it's tricky. You can't get rid of it. You can't sell that on. So this particular stone does eventually end back up in the collection. And it's one of the stones that was given back during the 25-cent locker in the bus stop in Miami debacle.
That's where they're being stored, in a bus locker here. And I think that's super interesting point you make there, Alyce. Like they were nearly, in a strange way, the victims of their own success, because the gems that they got were so distinctive that not even the shadiest of collectors on the black market would actually buy them. So they needed things that were, really good, but not that distinctive. The Eagle Diamond was one, which I think is really interesting because, first of all, this one has actually never been recovered. Probably because of exactly that. It was a diamond and could be recut and still maintain its value. It was 16 carats, and it was the largest diamond ever found in the United States of America. It was found in Wisconsin, in Samuel Wood, found in a hillside on very shallow ground, just under the surface, about 6 to 8 feet. The particular property owner here then thought to himself that, this is great. There's massive diamonds on my land.
Eureka! I found diamonds.
He wants to keep it under his hat, so he barricades the entire fields and hills that he has and starts to dig and finds absolutely no other diamonds whatsoever. And unfortunately for him, but then actually goes to the point of planting diamonds into the ground and getting prospectors in to assess the viability of the grounds for mining. But to no success. It seems that this diamond was a complete fluke to find it, but 16-carat Eagle diamond, and that is one of the most important stones in this heist that actually was not found. So
no, I'm sure it paid for legal bills while they were back and forth to New York on bail. It's likely that it was cut up and sold as different pieces to actually fund their legal fees. But the star of the show, no pun intended, is the Star of India. What's so special about the Star of India? Why was it the one stone that was on all of the headlines, the New York Times, the Star of India is gone, JP Morgan collection? Besides the fact that the stone was not insured, so the museum had no way of getting any kind of monetary value back for it whatsoever. Besides that, it's also the largest star sapphire that's known of. It was 563 carats. Absolutely exquisite color. So as we know, as you walk around the show, you've got different examples of what looks beautiful. And, sometimes you tick 2 boxes and 1 box isn't, ticked. Or sometimes you tick 1 box and 2 boxes isn't ticked. This ticks every box. This is like the perfect storm of star sapphires. Has a beautiful 6-rayed star on the top, but it also has a beautiful 6-rayed star on the bottom. So top and bottom with these beautifully 6-rayed stars. But not only that, size tick, 2 stars tick, it also has one of the most beautiful colorations of star sapphires in the world. Usually you find a lot of gray material and people say, yeah, it's grayish blue, you know. And you're like, no, it's bluish gray, you know. It's gray is the predominant color. Here it is a beautiful hue of blue. And it doesn't photograph very well, but when you go and see it in person in the museum, you can see why they were really apprehensive to get it back. It is such a beautiful stone. And again, it's one of a kind. You can't cut down a 563 carat stone, star sapphire, and still have the same kind of value that it actually holds. So this one was also returned as part of the jewellery locker incident. But one of my favourite stones, definitely, of the heist.
In a similar vein, and we've had the Midnight Star, which is a sapphire, a ruby and a sapphire. But one I think that's really interesting is the DeLong ruby was another one that was taken. And the DeLong ruby is 100 carat Burmese unheated ruby. So in terms of origin, if we're talking about rubies, Burmese rubies are the most valuable, most sought after ones. You know, you get great color ones from different locations, but these are the ones that are at the top of the market. Unheated, you know, and I'm sure that our Jack Roland Murphy was not too concerned about this, but unheated, you can heat stones to enhance their color, to improve the asterism, which is the gem phenomenon that gives a star ruby or a star sapphire that 6-ray star. And obviously it's 100 carats. So, I mean, this one is also an enormous gem. So not 560 carats, but still 100 carats, pretty impressive. This one is part of a serious negotiation to get it back. There's a ransom demanded for this, $25,000. The government and the museum don't really want to give it because they interpreted that if they paid for this one, all of a sudden that every single other stone would all of a sudden become available at high prices. So they end up doing a deal. Dick Pearson was the middleman and he was the one who collected the money and returned the stone. He was later arrested for jewellery theft. So you can read into that whatever you want. And that one is returned. And like the Star of India and the Midnight Star, you can see all of those ones in what probably for me is one of my favorite mineral halls or gem collections of the world in the Natural History Museum in New York.
So just to wrap up, what happened to everybody? Where are the stones now? Firstly, I'd like to talk about the museum because unfortunately, if you're all taking notes and thinking that you can scale the side of the building and get into the gem hall, it is now no longer available to do so. Although the museum does not let you know that this heist has happened, they quickly changed their security after they recovered the stones. And today, if you go into the mineral hall, it's just been redone. It's amazing. Honestly, such a beautiful gem hall. But there are no windows, you know? There are no windows in that hall, and I'm pretty sure we all know why. And the Star of India is in the center, and it has sensors, and it has everything going for it. And I'm pretty sure they have an inventory now because that was also one of the problems that they had when the heist happened is the police came in and they were like, okay, give us an inventory of what the museum actually has. And they had no inventory of the stones. So there's a lot of different accounts that 22 stones were taken, 24 stones were taken, 28 stones were taken, or 28 pieces were taken. But the real number of how many were taken, we don't know. We really don't. I don't even think Jack Roland Murphy knew at the end of it. But you can be assured that there is definitely an inventory of their stones now. And it just has, you know, allowed them to understand that security is really important. And now when you go into the hall, everything is secure and beautiful for everybody to enjoy.
And for the man himself, Jack Roland Murphy, his life took quite an interesting turn. So they served approximately 2 years for this jewellery heist. Following that, he kind of deviated into slightly other elements of the crime world. There were 2 ladies in Miami who worked in a bank, and they ended up one day taking about $500,000 worth of bonds. And they were asking around everyone in Miami, what are we going to do with these bonds? Jack Roland Murphy's name came up. They took the bonds to Jack Roland Murphy. did some sort of a deal. Long story short, unfortunately, these two ladies ended up going missing. They were later found murdered. Jack Roland Murphy was found guilty of this murder, sentenced to, I think his release date was 2145. So 2 consecutive life sentences plus a whole load of other things. However, and there's a trend with Jack Roland Murphy. He's charming guy, whatever way he does it.
He's the best at it.
Yeah.
If he does something, he is the best at it. That's what it is. It's like, I'm the best violinist, I'm the best surfer, I'm the best jewel heist thief in the world. And when he goes to prison, he is the best prisoner.
He's the best prisoner with the longest sentence, but he quickly works on that. So he gets very involved with church inside the prison. He ends up becoming an absolute model citizen. He becomes a mentor and advisor to lots of different people inside the prison. So much so that his sentence gets reduced and he gets out, I think, in
1986.
1986.
So he does 17 years when he was supposed to actually be released in 2145. He is released in 1986. He gets married to a journalist who was doing a story on him and falls in love with him while he's in prison. And although I was like, does he go back into crime? Because he was very good at it. Definitely not as agile as he was when he was a younger man. But he actually commits the rest of his life to continue to go to prisons throughout the United States to preach the word.
Yeah, and the big question is, was this genuine or was it his attempt to get a reduced sentence? Over the next 30 years, he does over 6,000 trips to different prisons all over the US. So I think for that long, it has to be at least a little bit true. So
something's there. Yeah. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, and actually, he even wrote a book on it, which you can buy online. There's not many copies available, but it's called Jewels for the Journey. So
yeah, it's hilarious because he's talking about his heists, but he's also talking about God at the same time, and he's also talking about doing drugs and how that also feels like speaking to God. So it's a bit of a hilarious story.
Once you know something about him, it's definitely worth having a read. So, final thoughts, Alyce. What's your view on Jack Roland Murphy's character?
As a character, I find him really entertaining. Do I want him in my vicinity around my jewels? Absolutely not. Does he look absolutely amazing in 1960s surf gear? 100%.
I think we'll wrap it up there, and we'll have an opportunity for any questions now if anyone wants to ask them in just a moment. What I'd like just to say, I hope you all enjoyed the show. The podcast is called Gem Pursuit. There's magazines here if anyone wants to grab one at the end of some information on the podcast and some of our jewellery. We're also in booth 1132 if anyone wants to call over and say hello. I know some people have travelled here to see us today, so thank you for everyone who made the effort to come down and see us. And thank you to Michelle and the original Miami Beach Antique Show. We really enjoyed doing it. We'll publish it on our podcast. Thank you all very much. And any questions, feel free to ask us. And make sure you get a magazine on your way out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what an episode that was. It was such a blast to record in front of everyone at the original Miami Beach Antique Show. I hope you all enjoyed it. Look, an episode like that takes a lot of time and effort to get it together. And I just want to say a special thanks to Alyce, my co-host, who put in a huge amount of effort and research in putting that together, along with our assistants in terms of graphics, Darcy, Fenia and Sarah as well in the shop. And of course, Veronique, our podcast manager, put in a huge effort and a lot of research into that. We had actually people who joined us from all over the United States. One in particular, I remember, flew in directly from Nebraska, a family, just to listen to the podcast. So thank you for everyone who made the time and the effort to come down to see us, and of course the event organisers and Michelle Orman there, who put in a special effort too. So thank you very much to everyone, and of course to our producer Ross Hannon of Tape Deck, and for me, your host Matthew Weldon. We'll see you next time.